The Conjuring franchise is one of the most successful extended universes in recent times, especially when it comes to horror. If you're a creep like me, which you probably are if you're watching this, you like all things horror, and you know that horror does not really do well in the mainstream media, but The Conjuring has solidified a name for itself, and so have Ed and Lorraine Warren. The main characters of a majority of the movies, the main core movies, are about them and their cases. Or should I say they're loosely about them and their cases. There's a couple other movies in the franchise that are not directly involving Ed and Lorraine Warren, but are based on their cases. They are kind of just lore building movies, prequels, and they actually don't have anything to do with the Warrens. But even still, those movies have done very well and they contribute to the good name that the Warrens have made for themselves, even posthumously. But how much of the real life Warrens were actually transferred into the fictional Warrens? Like what we see on screen, how similar is that to how these people actually were in real life? And based off the research I did, they're not very similar. They really aren't. Before I get into it, I do just obviously need to put a disclaimer out there that this is all alleged. This is all my opinion. This is all research I gathered off the internet that anybody can get a hold of. These are not scholarly, peer reviewed, evidence based sources. So, this is by no means me saying this is fact, but this is very much so what I believe about the Warrens in general. Another disclaimer before I even start talking about the Warrens and their cases is I have a cat, and she is a young, spunky little girl, and I love her very much, but she is very loud and she runs around, so you'll definitely be seeing and hearing her. I will do my best to edit her out, but at the end of the day, she is a cat. I got her because I wanted a cat, not a quiet, unmoving animal. So I let her do what she does for the most part. So I apologize if that bothers you, but I'm not going to be reprimanding my cat for doing cat things. So you're going to see her, you're going to hear her, but I think you'll love her as much as I do. I hope it's not too distracting. And once again, I apologize, but I'm just going to do a blanket one in the beginning, and that'll count for the whole video. I hope it's okay with you guys. So I did a lot of research into this, at least by my standards. I did a lot of research. It's all here on my Kindle, and you're gonna see me probably like looking off screen. It's just because I'm reading all my notes. I have a lot of notes here. Okay, I have let's see, I have 17 pages now. Okay, so like this is like really, yeah, it's gonna be a thing. I had a lot of fun looking into it, and I just want you to know why I'm going to be looking elsewhere for most of the video. This is the first time I've really done something like this, so obviously I don't have my setup mastered, and I'm really sorry, but I'm just hoping that the actual content itself will make up for the lack of production quality, okay? Now that I have all of the boring disclaimers out of the way, let's get into the actual research, the content here, okay? Ed and Lorraine Warren are real people. They were paranormal investigators and demonologists, researchers for about 50 years. They were well known in their field, okay? Whether they were known because people liked them or not, they were well known, even prior to the Conjuring movies coming out. They founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, NESPR, in 1952. They also have the Warren Museum of the Occult in Monroe, Connecticut, which started out in their own home and then later moved to a different location. This museum, they kept little trinkets that are allegedly haunted, and they need to be kept away from people for the greater good. So the Warrens had already made a good name for themselves, but in 2013 is actually when the Conjuring franchise begins. 2013 is when we get The Conjuring, the first movie, the first installment in this entire thing. It's your typical haunted house, family, possession movie. To me, it's honestly a modern classic. The Conjuring is it is what it is, you know? I love that movie. It's near and dear to my heart. That's the only one that I think is actually good. The rest of them I just watch out of obligation because I love the original one so much. And fictional Ed and Lorraine Warren are so adorable. You want to know what happens to them, okay? You do. Even me, even still after doing all this research, I want to keep up with them, okay? That's the only Ed and Lorraine Warren I identify with. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are the only Warrens that I acknowledge, okay? Let's make that very clear. So, 2013, we get The Conjuring, and this is based off the Perron family case that the Warrens investigate. Then we have The Conjuring 2. This is based off the Enfield poltergeist case. Then we have The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. This is based off Arnie Johnson, which is a criminal case as well as a paranormal investigation case that Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved with. They worked with him prior to the murders. And then allegedly, we have The Conjuring, The Last Rites coming out in September of this year, 2025. And it is allegedly, okay, I don't know for sure, about the Snedeker family. The Snedeker family is a significant case, and this is the one that I will be probably talking the most about today in this video. And if Last Rites is about the Snedeker family, as much as I love the Conjuring franchise, it's going to be a difficult watch for me now, knowing what I know. Also in the Conjuring franchise, we have the Annabelle movies, Annabelle and Annabelle Creation. Now, the cameo, the little snippet we get of the Warrens investigating Annabelle in the first Conjuring is more accurate to the real life Annabelle case. Annabelle the movie, this whole story, this origin story, as far as research is concerned, that's not what Annabelle is about. It was just a fictional movie created to expand the Conjuring universe. Same with Annabelle Creation. It's kind of the fictional backstory to the fictional backstory of Annabelle, and I'll get into it more later. But like I said, the 10 to 15 minutes that we get in the beginning of The Conjuring with the Warrens investigating the Annabelle doll is as close to the real life case as we'll get. Annabelle and Annabelle Creation are just a fun time, I guess. And then we also have The Nun and The Nun 2. Those are also not based on any Ed and Lorraine Warren cases. They are just lore. These are just actual spin-offs of the Conjuring movies, whereas Annabelle is its own entity and doesn't really involve them. But there are no actual investigated cases by the Warrens in real life about the nun or any nun for any reason like that. Another thing about the Warrens is that they claim to have investigated 10,000 cases, 10,000 plus cases in their lifetime is what they say, but the math just isn't mathing there. They kind of got a late start to paranormal investigations. I know that they say that they've been doing the investigations for a little more than 50 years, but just the rate at which you'd have to be investigating cases and wrapping them up, it's just not really looking too possible here, okay? Let's get into Ed and Lorraine Warren individually a little bit. I'm not going to give full-length biographies on them, but just a little bit of a background on the two of them. Let's start with Ed. Ed was born on September 7th, 1926, and he passed away on August 23rd, 2006. He died of natural causes, no ghosts, no demons, none of that. He had a stroke and then died from complications related to the stroke. Ed is the self-proclaimed demonologist of the couple, but he was actually never backed by the church. He never went to seminary school. He's not like an ordained minister, nothing like that. He also never got a degree in parapsychology, so for all intents and purposes, he basically just started calling himself a demonologist. He allegedly grew up in a haunted house, and he saw a flicker of light transform into an apparition in front of him when he was younger, and that's what triggered his lifelong interest in all things paranormal. So let's get into Lorraine. Lorraine was born January 31st, 1927, and she died April 18th, 2019. She also died of natural causes, no ghosts, no demons, nothing paranormal. She was the self-proclaimed clairvoyant of the couple. It is reported that she discovered her psychic abilities around the age of 12, and it was a whole big thing for her because her parents, her family thought that it was sinful that she could see the dead. Other people believe that once Ed started calling himself a demonologist, Lorraine needed something to call herself, so she was an odd man out and went with the clairvoyant story. There really isn't too much proof for either argument to prove or disprove. So, Ed and Lorraine Warren met in 1944. Ed was working in a movie theater. Lorraine would go to this movie theater frequently with her mother. I think it was weekly. When she would go with her mother, she ended up crossing paths with Ed. They started dating. In 1945, Ed ended up being in the Navy, but the ship that he was working on sank, so he was sent home for 30 days. During these 30 days in 1945, he actually married Lorraine, and then he went back, came back, stayed home, and in 1946, they had a daughter named Judy. So, they met, they've been together pretty much their whole life, cute, wholesome. What can you do? So, how did they get started into this, though? They're just any regular couple. Ed was in the army, now he's home, now they have a kid. How do you go from being a vet to being a ghost hunter? How does that really work out? So when Ed came home, he actually enrolled himself in art school, and he ended up allegedly dropping out of art school because he felt as though he was more talented than the instructors. So what could they teach him if he was better than them? So he drops out of art school and they start ghost hunting. They both have some type of previous interest in ghost hunting. They need to make money, and that's what they do. So what they do, this was their tactic in the beginning. They would drive around their town and they would see houses that looked haunted, okay? Maybe they're falling apart, maybe the roof is busted, maybe a couple shingles are missing, maybe the lawn isn't mowed as good as it should, but you got some weeds in there. Oh, you're haunted. So what they would do is, using Ed's art abilities, Ed would draw or paint the house from the outside and then embellish the image by adding little ghosts flying out the window or gargoyles on the front lawn or some dark demonic entity at the front door, things like that. After he had this picture, Lorraine would actually go up to the owners, knockety knock. Oh my God, bitch, look at this that I just saw coming out your house. I was driving by. I had to have my man paint a picture of what we just saw because we couldn't believe our eyes. I think your house was haunted. We're paranormal investigators. You should let us research. You should let us investigate your house. And they would make their way into the owner's home and they would investigate. So, honestly, not a bad plan. Not a bad plan. It's also alleged that they didn't ever charge people for the investigations, and I see why, because they kind of just manipulate their way into your home. So it would be kind of crazy to come up to someone and ask them for a service and then ask them to pay you, because at the time, the person with the home is performing the warrant of service. They're letting you come in and investigate. They didn't call you. They didn't ask for you to come. You just came up to their doorstep and convince them. So I guess it's good that they didn't charge people, but they made their money in other avenues. Ed, when they were first kicking things off, became a bus driver for the city, and keep that in mind for later. I won't get into that too much right now, but on the side of doing the ghost hunting, he also drove a bus for the city. So as I said previously, neither of them are accredited, have any type of degrees. They are not ordained. They are not recognized by the Catholic Church. They don't have any type of anything in exorcisms or ghosts or paranormal. They just were smooth talkers and got their way in. Entrepreneurs, I guess. What can you say? So their early work was mostly about ghosts, okay? So they were investigating haunted houses. Everything was a haunted house, there was a ghost, things of that nature. Until 1973, The Exorcist comes out. And this takes America by storm, okay? Just demons, possession, that shit was popping at that time, okay? After this comes out, almost, if not every case that the Warrens investigate involve a demonic entity. Everything is there's a demon in your house, there's a demon in you, possessing you, there's a demon following you. It doesn't matter if you're in the house or not, whatever the case may be, there's a demon involved. And also, a lot of their cases too involved demonic entities doing SA. I can't say it on here, but you know what I mean, which is interesting. But moving forward, they're investigating people. They're saying your house is haunted, there's a demon in your house, you need an exorcism, yada, yada, yada. They start making a name for themselves. Once they start making a name for themselves locally, at least, they start doing weekly lectures. This is where they make their money. They charge $20 per head to attend these lectures. It was in a restaurant, but people would come. And according to some of the people that actually worked for the Warrens and helped them out, they would get anywhere from 30 to 40 people per lecture weekly. So they were making pretty decent money, especially for the time. So they made their money in other ways to make up for them not charging for the actual investigations they were doing. Okay, so let's get into some of their cases. I'm going to start in chronological order, and this brings us to Annabelle. So they've been doing smaller cases, obviously, prior to this, but Annabelle is probably their first most notable case. This happened in 1970. This is a Raggedy Ann doll that was given to a nursing student as a gift. And, she's a kind, caring nursing girly, so of course she's gonna take this weird ass doll, and it starts leaving notes. It starts leaking blood, apparently, according to her. It is put in one place and moved to another place when she comes back home. Things of that nature. She ends up, contacting the spirit that has been trying to mess with this doll, and the spirit claims that it is a little girl who died named Annabelle. And of course, she's a nurse. She's a sweet, caring woman. She's a nurse. So she lets in this spirit to possess this doll, because of course that's what nurses do. And I only say this because I'm a nurse and I really don't understand her reasoning behind this. Maybe it's because it's the 70s, it's a different time, but like, bitch, if this was happening to me, I wouldn't have even taken the doll in the first place. Like, if you're in nursing school, you're at least like 20 something years old, maybe 18 at the bare minimum. Why the fuck are you taking a big ass Raggedy Ann doll for no reason? What are you doing with it? Second of all, you're a grown ass woman. I don't care if you're a nurse, if you're a contractor, if you're jobless, unemployed, you're homeless. Why would you let a random spirit entity possess your doll? I don't know. But anyways, that was the girl's reasoning behind it, which is why I get so irritated by it, but whatever. So she gives this spirit permission to enter the doll and inhabit it, and it starts attacking people and doing crazy shit. And she reaches out to the Warrens, and the Warrens come by and they basically say, yeah, this is not a little girl, this is an otherworldly presence, aka a demon. This was never a spirit that ever lived. It's a demon. It was not a little girl who died young. We're gonna bless it, and then we're gonna take it off your hands because there's nothing you can do. That was it. That was pretty much it. It's not a very big, crazy case. The Warrens ended up putting the Annabelle doll in their Warren Occult Museum, and that's pretty much it. But a lot of people notice that this is very eerily similar to an episode of the 1963 Twilight Zone episode called Living Doll, and there is a character in the episode named Annabelle. So a lot of people think that this story was kind of exaggerated or fabricated, or maybe even just entirely completely made up by the Warrens and this girl Angie, um, to get clout basically. And this is like, if not the biggest attraction in their haunted museum still to this day, the Annabelle doll. So, you know, who wouldn't do it for money? I would. So next we have the Perron family. This is the case that the Conjuring original movie was based on. This happened in 1971, the year after Annabelle. So the Warrens had kind of made a name for themselves. At this point, they are doing their lectures, they're doing their investigations at people's houses, they have their little museum. They're doing not too shabby. This case involves a family in Rhode Island that were being allegedly haunted by a witch called Bathsheba. Allegedly, Bathsheba cursed the land, so whoever lived there after her would be haunted, their entire family would be haunted. And as you know, this is the complete storyline of the original Conjuring movie. You know, she possesses the mother to kill the child. Every family that moves in gets possessed. The kids die, etc. But Bathsheba was actually a real person. She was born in Rhode Island in 1812. She married in her 30s and had a son. It's believed that she had 3 other children as well, but they all died at really early ages. And there was an incident where a child who was not hers was in her care. And this child died, and they say that it was caused by an incision in the back of the head. And so this, combined with the fact that she was hot and young and had a rich husband, she was the talk of the town. The 1800s bitches did not like her. They were jealous of her. And what do you do in the 1800s? And there's a woman you don't like. Witch, 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 witch. You're a witch. And that's what happened. There was no really solid evidence of any demonic entities or hauntings in this house, the Conjuring house. A lot of people have claimed to have stories in this house, and a lot of people say that those stories are fabricated because they want to get some type of financial gain from it, which is a common theme of this video. So Andrea Perron is one of the daughters of the family that was living in the house at the time that this haunting was occurring. And in an interview, she says she doesn't even really know how the Warrens found them. She thinks maybe a family friend had went to one of the lectures and told the Warrens what the Perron family had been telling her because they were close friends and she was worried about them. I know in the movie, it looks like the mom, Carolyn Perron, actually went to one of these lectures herself and then heard about like demonic possession and like approaches the Warrens herself and like calls upon them, but they just kind of showed up basically. According to them, Andrea, the father was really skeptical of the Warrens. The mom was more open-minded, and she was so desperate because she wasn't really sure how to understand what was happening at the house at the time, and she just kind of, went along with it. The kids were really happy that the Warrens were there because they felt finally heard. They were the ones that said that they were experiencing most of the paranormal experiences there. A quote from Andrea, which I think is pretty interesting. She says, "Mom thought Lorraine showed a bit too much compassion for our plight." I'll get into that a little more later. So Andrea also says that their uncle contacted a priest, and the priest from the Vatican literally said, "You can't bless this house. This house cannot be cleansed. Like, there's nothing you could do." So whether or not the Bathsheba story is real, whether she was really a witch or not, according to Andrea Perron, in this day and age, in 1971, the priests were saying, this shit is so fucking evil, you can't clean this shit. So, I don't know. Andrea says, the truth is, the Warrens bit off more than they could chew. Suffice to say, they came to help, but were ill-equipped to handle the job, and in the process, they made matters worse. Though none of us believe that that was their intention, including my father. He was afraid of them and what was in the house, and lashed out in anger toward them, running them off the property. It's actually said that the father, Andrea says that her father punched Ed Warren in the face because of them suggesting, demonic entities and presences for the explanation of why their kids were going through what they were going through. A lot of people think that the kids were just making this up, they were having nightmares, things of that nature. Um, what can you do? It's a really weird situation. Is your typical weird haunting, cold spots, hearing noises, smelling things, being grabbed, being touched, bruises, whatever. So, to kind of negate all of this, the owner of the actual Conjuring house posted like an hour-long YouTube video exposing the entire history of the house. But a lot of people do think that her saying that the parents and Warrens made this up was just her being bitter, because this video came out, I believe, a year after the Conjuring movie was released, and it is said that she is upset because she didn't get any type of cut in the movie earnings because she owns the Conjuring house now. Allegedly, she was really close friends with Andrea Perrin back in the day before she claimed that Andrea was making it up. And she herself said, like, yeah, I seen this. Like, they're being honest. Like, I saw this too. That happened at their house. And then she recants it all and exposes them for lying. And then friends of the Warrens say that Norma Sutcliffe, the woman who owns the house and posted this video, was demonically possessed. So, there's a lot of back and forth surrounding the original Conjuring case, the Perrin family. But from what I've gathered and the opinion I've made based off my own research, which I encourage you to do your own, I don't really think it's real, or maybe there were some creepy instances, but it's not as much as they were claiming. And I believe in ghosts. I believe in ghosts. I believe in demons, things like that, but I'm not stupid. I feel like a lot of these cases were not entirely truthful. So the next most notable case for the Warrens, chronologically, is the Amityville house. This timeline is like 1975 to 1976. But in 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. Shoots and kills his entire family of 6. He goes to prison. The house goes up for sale. In 1975, the Lutz family moves in, and after 28 days of being paranormally harassed, allegedly, they move out. They abandon the house after 28 days. Now, what is it that they saw or experienced? According to them, they saw red goo on the walls, which ended up turning into green slime. They saw levitating furniture. Some of the family members even levitated as well. The house was consistently cold, even though they had a fire going at all times in the house. They saw a red-eyed demon pig entity very frequently. A priest came by to bless the home at one point, and there's a couple different stories, but the most common one I found was that he was slapped in the face by an unseen force and told to get out. The house had the typical bad smells, cold spots, things like that. And it's also said that the mom was aging very quickly. They described her as a 9-year-old crone, but I don't want to say that. It just, I guess she aged really fast in the span of 28 days. So, all of this happens. It's too much for them. Things are getting too creepy. Apparently, like the very last night that they stayed there, like before they decided to leave, the parents' bed levitated. Kathy Lutz, the mom, she also is levitating off the levitating bed, and then she falls off. And then the dad is so scared, he's paralyzed with fear, he's stuck in the bed, and then he can hear the kids in the room above him. Their beds are banging on the ground, up and down, levitating. The doors are slamming shut and closed, shut. Like, it's just a whole thing, and then they leave. This is what they're saying. I'm not saying this is what I believe, but this is their story, okay? So it gets to this point, they gotta go. 5 months after they leave the house, Ed and Lorraine actually go investigating. this house. Of course they would. This is their jam. So Ed claims that he was shoved down while he was in the house by some unseen presence as well. Lorraine said that she kept getting these, very accurate visions of the DeFeo murders, and they claim that they caught a demonic entity on camera in the basement. So, with all of these experiences, not only from the Lutzes, but from the Warrens too, it seems as though this house is pretty freaking haunted, And when Ronald DeFeo Jr. was in court, he actually tried to plead not guilty by insanity, and his claim was that demons told him that he had to do what he did. So maybe the house really is possessed by demons, what can you do? And at the time, this case was a really big deal, it was pretty known nationally at least. But I don't know, the Comarty family moved in after the Lutzes, and the Comartys lived there for decades. And they say that they never had any weird experiences. They lived a peaceful life in this house, and almost everything that the Lutzes claimed to see never happened. They say that they had a good time there. There's no weirdness. And also, it's kind of known that the Lutz family, they were in debt and they were facing legal troubles as well. And George was really into the occult. So they need a quick buck. George already liked ghosts and demons before even moving into this house. Now they have this house that was owned by a mass murderer who claims that the devil and demons told him he has to kill his family. Maybe it's a good opportunity to make a crazy story and sell it. And then we'll be out of our debt and pay for all of our legal problems, Who knows? So after this, the Lutzes end up meeting William Weber. Now, William Weber is the lawyer for Ronald DeFeo Jr. And by the time that Weber and the Lutzes had actually met each other, Weber was already trying to shop around the idea of releasing a book about the DeFeo family murders. I think it was called The Devil on My Back or something was what he was trying to release. And then he meets the Lutzes, who are now saying that they're having all these demonic experiences at this house. So the Lutzes and Weber meet up, and according to Weber himself, he says that they brainstormed the idea for a book, quote, over many bottles of wine. And this is how Amityville haunting came to be. Weber says, quote, we took real life incidents and transposed them. In other words, it was a hoax. So Weber, being the lawyer for Ronald DeFeo Jr. in his case, was able to give the Lutzes unknown to the public information about the case and about the family, and together with this knowledge that other people don't have and the Lutzes' paranormal experience, they combined these two things together to make a believable story about what happened at the house. So one of the things that Weber talks about is the demon pig with glowing red eyes. He told the Lutzes that there's a cat that the neighbors have that frequently would go over and look into the DeFeo's windows. And I guess the Lutzes themselves had seen this cat a couple times. And so that cat looking into the window at night turned into the demon pig with glowing red eyes that the family would see. Another thing is the red goo that ends up turning into green slime at points too. At one point, Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s father had actually slapped his mother in the face in front of him while the mother was holding a plate of spaghetti, and has caused the spaghetti to go flying all over the walls. Red goop on the walls. And with this knowledge that only Weber has, the two combined forces, the Lutzes and Weber, and this is how the red goo that turns into green slime comes about too. So a lot of the things that the Lutzes say that they've seen are allegedly, according to Weber himself, fake. Um, but the Lutzes have stood by this story that they have for a very long time and they stand on it. This shit is real. They never made this up, whatever. But the Warrens, their involvement in this was that they got shoved down the stairs. Lorraine saw the premonitions and visuals of the murders of the DeFeos and that they got the demonic entity captured in the basement. But actually, the most damning evidence, which is obviously the picture, because everything else is kind of hearsay, the picture was actually exposed to be a picture accidentally captured of somebody else that was involved in the investigation with them in the basement. So they accidentally took a picture of this person with an infrared camera, and that's why his eyes were like glowing and looking crazy because it was an infrared camera. So there's really not much there. And for the Warrens' involvement themselves, they're not really involved too much in Amityville. So that one is kind of known as a hoax, and it's not in the Conjuring universe really, but it's pretty famous and a lot of people know about it, but some people don't. So I wanted to cover that one because the Warrens are somewhat associated with it, even though they're really not that much involved. So next we have the Enfield poltergeist in 1977. Now, this one is kind of weird. In real life, the Warrens really did not have much involvement in this at all, according to 90% of people, and then the other 10% being the Warrens and their posse say that they were involved. But this is the basis of The Conjuring too. So in terms of like the whole Conjuring franchise extended universe, the Enfield poltergeist is a pretty important case, but there's really not much. I could tell you a lot about the Enfield poltergeist, but this video is about the Warrens, so I'm only going to talk very minimally about this because the Warrens were not very heavily involved in this case. So the Warrens claim to be extremely involved in the Enfield poltergeist case, but according to the people that actually worked on the case, the Warrens came uninvited, as is their usual MO for most things, as we discussed earlier, and the family actually refused to let them in. They had no idea who these people were. Why the fuck are you coming here? We're having shit go down. Who are you? Get out of my house. Normal reaction. The actual investigators of this case were Guy Lyon Playfair and Maurice Gross. Playfair says that the Warrens came on a separate occasion and told them, look, you two can make a lot of money off this case. You should let us in on it. They don't. He also confirms that they were never invited. The family never heard of them until they showed up. And that was pretty much it for the Warrens' involvement in it. So the whole Conjuring 2 movie is basically just like fiction, like entirely, like obviously. It's a horror, like demon movie. The first one even is too. But the main drawing point that like gets people to watch these movies is the fact that they are based on a true story. So The Conjuring like actually is a real case, like a real thing that happened. I'm not saying the ghosts and all that is real. That's up to basically your own opinion. To every person who sees it, it's subjective if that was real, but it did actually occur. This family did say demonic things happened, and the Warrens actually were there and said the same thing. The Warrens were never involved in the Enfield poltergeist. They tried to get in on the action and were not allowed. Nobody knew of them because this was also in London. Like people did not know about them. They didn't care and they didn't want random people in their house. So the fact that this ended up becoming The Conjuring 2 is really crazy to me. But the actual case itself is based off of a poltergeist. So the stuff you see in the Conjuring movie is pretty much, the standard poltergeist experience, but the Warrens weren't involved. They didn't come and save the day. It's kind of strange, but they are so adamant that they were involved in this case, and I guess that's how it became part of the franchise. So, this next case is actually probably the most interesting, in my opinion at least. This is the Arnie Johnson Devil Made Me Do It case of 1981. This is also the basis of the movie The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And this one actually makes sense that it made it into the franchise and got a whole movie about it because, unlike Amityville and Enfield Poltergeist, the Warrens didn't lie about how involved they were. They didn't just show up out of nowhere or show up after the fact. They actually were involved in this case prior to Arnie even doing what he did. So, Arnie Johnson was accused of and subsequently convicted of killing his landlord. So, there's a couple people you need to know for right now. As we get into it further, I will give more names, but I don't want to be confusing. So, at this point, you need to know Arnie Johnson, who is the main suspect of this whole thing, I guess, and Debbie Glatzel. Debbie Glatzel is Arnie's fiance. Debbie has a younger brother named David Glatzel. Arnie and Debbie live with Debbie's family. So Debbie's younger brother, David, starts acting weird. So Debbie's younger brother, David, starts acting really weird. And this is the reason the Warrens end up getting involved. They actually were contacted by the Glatzels because they believed that David, the younger brother, was possessed. And they wanted the Warrens to fix it, do whatever they could. But so you may be thinking, why do they think he's possessed? Like, what did he do? He's just a little boy. Like, is he just being weird? What's tea? And I will tell you, okay? So the activity began when Arnie, Debbie, and David began cleaning this new rental property. So Arnie and Debbie got this property, and then the younger brother David was like helping them clean it out and work on it. So David claims to have seen an old demonic man who spoke in Latin to him and threatened to take David's soul. Since this, David started having night terrors. He started acting really bizarrely. He kept getting random scratches and bruises on him that he couldn't explain. The family also claims to have seen David being beaten and choked by invisible forces, and they could also end up seeing red handprints on his neck from being choked after the fact, even though it's invisible hands, an invisible thing doing this to him. But they claim to have seen the action while it happened, so seeing him get choked, the whole, and then getting thrown around and beaten up, and then afterwards they're seeing the aftermath of it. They're seeing the proof, the bruises, whatever. Allegedly, the boy would growl, hiss, he'd speak in other voices, and then in these other voices, he would start talking in tongues too. He would recite passages from the Bible and from Paradise Lost. And this boy, like, according to the family and everybody who knew him, there's just no way he knew any of this. Like, he wasn't like a dumb kid or anything by any means, but like, he didn't know to speak in tongues. He didn't know the Bible off the top of his head like that to be reciting passages. So everything was just very weird. They didn't understand what was going on. And so as a result, the family ended up calling a Catholic priest to bless the house. And this didn't work. It did nothing. He was still acting the same way, growling, hissing, marks coming up on his body. So the church couldn't do anything. We'll call the Warrens. So Lorraine claims to have seen this apparition standing next to David, like upon first sight of David. She claims to have seen like some weird, like black demonic entity like latching onto him at the side. So, not one, not two, but three lesser exorcisms were performed on this little boy. And during these exorcisms, Lorraine claims to have seen David levitate. He stopped breathing sporadically, so he's having periods of apnea during this whole thing. He's predicting the future, and when he predicted the future, allegedly, he predicted that Arnie would kill someone. According to other witnesses and Arnie himself, Arnie was egging on the demon during these exorcisms, and later he came face to face with this demon, and that's how he became possessed. So he's in the room. He's like, fuck you, demon. Come take me instead. You not shit. All that type of stuff. The demon gets out. And afterwards, once the demon's out, Arnie's out and about and he looks into this well on the property. And when he looks into this well, he sees the demon. He makes direct eye contact with the demon. And this is allegedly how he becomes possessed by the demon. So basically, Arnie's fiance's brother gets possessed. He gets exorcised. The demon jumps out from the brother to Arnie. Okay? After this, Arnie started acting similar to David. And Debbie was like, no, this is crazy. We're not dealing with this. We're moving. We're getting out of here. So Debbie gets a new job as a dog groomer for this man, Alan Bono. And he also has a property for rent, and they end up living in this property because it's really close to her job and it's just convenient. So this Alan Bono guy ends up becoming Debbie's landlord and boss. And this is who Arnie would eventually go on to kill. So the main event all goes down on February 16th, 1981. Arnie calls in sick to work, and with his time off, he goes with Debbie to her job at the kennel at Alan Bono's place. So, along with Arnie and Debbie, Arnie brings his little sister Wanda and Debbie's 9-year-old little cousin Mary. So, all of them end up getting taken out for lunch by Alan Bono himself. And while they're out, he ends up going to this bar and getting fucking hammered. And then they all come back. Alan Bono is just, he's obliterated, okay? He's acting crazy. Shit's getting weird. So Debbie tells the two little girls, hey, why don't you leave the room? Let the adults talk, because Bono is just getting really out of pocket. So while the girls are leaving the room, Bono ends up grabbing Mary, who is Debbie's 9-year-old little cousin, and he will not let her go. So Arnie's in the other room. He hears a commotion. He comes in and he's like, let her go. Let her go. It's not working. They're kind of at a like impasse. He's not letting her go. And Arnie Johnson ends up stabbing Bono repeatedly with a knife, and he ends up getting 4 to 5 stab wounds to the chest, and one of them is like directly to the heart, and he ends up dying. And it's said that Arnie was growling while he was stabbing Bono to death. Well, Arnie gets arrested, and the Warrens end up telling the police Arnie's possessed. Like, he didn't kill this man. The demon possessing him killed this man. And Arnie Johnson's lawyer actually tried to use the defense of not guilty by virtue of possession for the first time ever in court. And this obviously was not allowed by the judge. And Arnie Johnson ended up becoming convicted of first-degree manslaughter and served. So Arnie Johnson ended up being convicted of first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 10 to 20 years, but actually only served 5 years. This whole ordeal was huge news at the time. This was like a national story, like not even because of like Ed and Lorraine Warren, but just because of the whole entire thing. Like, not guilty by virtue of possession. What the hell? Like, that's a crazy defense. It's the first time it was seen in court. And the Warrens did end up testifying, taking the stand, all that good stuff. So they were heavily involved in this and kind of cemented into the case. So the fact that this movie was made and put into the franchise, this makes sense, but like The Conjuring 2 will never sit right with me, and it's also like my least favorite one anyways before even researching all of this. So yeah. And the last case that I'm going to be talking about regarding the Warrens is the Snedeker family. This occurred in 1986, and if the rumors are true, the final installment of the Conjuring franchise, which is supposed to be called The Conjuring: The Last Rites, it's supposed to be based off the Snedeker family. And if so, it's going to be an interesting watch. So, The Snedeker family moved from New York to Connecticut to get treatment for their son Philip, who suffered from Hodgkin's disease. And they found an apartment in this huge colonial house. It was perfect for them. They went to renovate the basement and they were going to make rooms for the kids in the basement to maximize the space that they already had. And while they were down there, they found a lot of mortuary equipment like coffin handles. They found a pulley, casket lift, the blood drainage pit. And seeing this, they had realized this used to be a funeral home. So they make the rooms in the basement because they're like, whatever, like we'll just throw this stuff out. It's not that big of a deal. We'll throw it out, we'll make rooms in the basement, and we'll get the most bang for our buck. So they make the rooms. Philip, the son, is down there along with the other children. And Philip complains of seeing shadow people, particularly a man in a pinstriped suit. And he also would hear voices and strange sounds. But his parents initially believed that these were hallucinations due to the cobalt treatment he was getting for the Hodgkin's disease at the time. But after moving to the basement and making these claims, Philip also began exhibiting really prominent personality changes. He was taking more interest into the occult. I guess they said that he wore a lot of leather, which I don't really know how that is a significant personality change, but I guess, like what is it, Satanic Panic and it's 86. If you like the occult and you wear leather, you're possessed. So he also was starting to get more violent, and like these tendencies he had were starting to increase. He broke into a neighbor's house. This was kind of like the final straw. And he assaulted a female cousin of his. So his parents sent him away because he was just getting out of hand. He was escalating too much. This isn't the Philip that they knew. After he leaves, the family believes that the entity that was possessing Philip turned its full attention onto the remaining family in the house. So the other kids say that they heard footsteps, voices, there's the rotten meat stench in the house, and they saw ghosts, apparitions. And the kids say that this continued on for years. They lived there for years and they just kept dealing with this demonic oppression, I guess, in their house. Carmen Snedeker, the mother, she reports a violent incident. She's in the shower, it wraps around her, she can't get out of it. It's like pressing into her face to where she can't breathe, she's struggling, and she believes that this is related to the demon. The demon did this to her. Carmen and Al, the dad, and their niece all claim to have been SA'd by an unearthly presence, is what they say. This is a direct quote from Carmen. One night I ran down the street with Kelly, who was being sodomized the whole way. So she's running down the street with Kelly, the niece, and the niece is being SA'd while running down the street, and Carmen can see this happening to her. I don't know. But at this point, the Warrens come in to investigate, and they end up staying with the Snedekers for 9 weeks total. And I'm sorry, this just makes me laugh, but the Warrens rated it 9 out of 10 in the scale of demonic possession. It was 9 out of 10 demonic. What? I'm sorry, that is just so funny to me. So the Warrens did an exorcism on the house. They tried to cleanse it, but I guess none of that worked, and the family ended up moving, and they wrote books, and there were movies based off the Snedeker family haunting after they had moved out. But this is where things get interesting. Now I'm going to get into all of the stuff that kind of negates everything, okay? Daryl Kern is the owner and the landlord of the house. And mind you, this was an apartment, so he's the owner, but he rents it out to other people. At the time that the Snedekers were there, they were in the lower half of the house, and the upper half, there was another tenant above them. So Daryl Kern says that they knew it was a funeral home before they even signed the lease to rent the bottom half of the house. They knew it was a funeral home. There was literally an engraved like sign in the ground on stone or whatever in front of the house that literally said Hallahan Funeral Home. Aside from that, the entire community, all the neighbors, everybody knows that it used to be a funeral home. Everybody knew that, including the other person who lived upstairs. Everybody was aware that this house used to be an active funeral home years and years and years prior. But apparently, the Snedekers rebuke this. They say, no, there was a piece of plywood on the ground covering the sign, so we didn't know. Kern also states that the paranormal activity the Snedekers say happened started escalating very conveniently around the time that the Snedekers were getting behind on rent. So they're not able to pay their rent on time, and then this demon starts harassing them. So then they can't pay the rent at all because how can I go to work if a demon is harassing me and my kids? And then he's gonna evict them. The eviction process is going through, and this is the time when the Warrens are there. They say the house is cleansed, but it's not doing anything, and the Snedekers move out before the eviction process actually goes through. So it's just kind of divine timing, right? Like, how crazy is that? No way. Of course the demon is real. What are you talking about? A lot of the neighbors around them corroborate the theory. Everybody knows that they were behind on their rent, and they all believe that this was planned ahead of time. The upstairs neighbor, Sandy, says that she never had any paranormal experiences here. The real kicker is Sandy, the upstairs neighbor, was also working for the real estate agency that the Snedekers used to find this house. And this agency that she worked for had specifically disclosed to the Snedekers that this used to be a funeral home, and they were okay with that. She also corroborated the fact that the paranormal activity they were reporting conveniently started when they were behind on rent or just not paying it flat out. But it's just a demon. How can I go to work if there's a demon in my house? How can I do that? Anyways, so there's all these crazy experiences. The Snedekers are going on TV by themselves, sometimes with the Warrens, doing interviews. Like, this whole thing is like, it's a pretty big deal. The Warrens commissioned Ray Garton, he's a horror writer, and they want him to write a nonfiction novel, a truly factual account about what they went through with the Snedekers, and it's supposed to be called In a Dark Place. Garton says it was virtually impossible to get a straight story from this family. Every family member had a different story, a different recollection of events, and these stories differed on a day-to-day basis, and it depended on who asked them. So, like, everybody just had something different to say. Like, they didn't know what they were talking about. They were just pulling shit out of their ass and hoping it stuck. He says, Ray Garton, that the family was dealing with drug and alcohol addiction, domestic abuse. They were financially unstable, in debt. Any problem really that a family could be dealing with, apparently the Snedekers were dealing with it. And he believes that that's why they were so inclined to make a story like this and to try and profit off it, because they thought that the money would help them fix their issues. A lot of people ask, well, why didn't you just leave the house if the house is haunted and there's demons here and it's a funeral home, yada yada? But her answer would change, of course, like I said before, it would change depending on who asked the question. If it was a TV interview, if it was with Ray Garton, her answer was forever changing. Sometimes it was because she says it's pointless for them to move because the entity would follow them. Take, for example, the episode where they were running down the street and the demon was following them, sodomizing the niece. But other times she said that she was unaware of what was going on because it was the kids being tormented and not her, which is really interesting because, as I mentioned prior, Carmen, the mother, Al, the father, and the niece, along with some of their other children, claim to have been SA'd themselves. But so, Carmen, how are you not aware of what was going on because it's only happening to the kids? But you said on live TV you were running down the street and a demon was sodomizing your niece. And then you also said on TV that you yourself were SA'd by a demon. Like, how do you not know that's happening if you said it was happening? Anyways, this otherworldly being that was essaying the female children of the house, it was most likely Philip. Philip was allegedly schizophrenic. He was not, hallucinating because of cobalt treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma. He was schizophrenic. He was dealing with some stuff, okay? And he was battling some demons, literally, but not like actual demons in the house. Like, schizophrenia is no joke. But, anyways, he was caught fondling his cousins on multiple occasions. And on one occasion, he was questioned by the police. And then when he was questioned, he said that he does this a lot at night and he secretly touches his cousins while they sleep, and he normally doesn't get caught because they're sleeping and they don't wake up. So the little girls saying that there's something touching them in their sleep, it's a demon, it's a ghost that's essaying them. It's not a ghost or a demon, it's Philip, and he apparently admitted to this to the police. And it's alleged that when he was sent away, he was actually sent away to a mental institution at the time. So, who really knows what the deal is with that? But moving forward, Ray Garton claims to have spoken to Philip only one time when he was trying to get the stories from everybody about this book. He was allowed by Carmen to speak to Philip over the phone only. He could not see him in person, and Carmen had to be there to supervise the call. So during this phone call that was supervised by Carmen, Philip started talking about taking drugs he liked to do, and he said he never experienced any paranormal activity in that house. And when he said that, Carmen ended the phone call, and Garton was not allowed to contact Philip ever again. So, I don't know. As I mentioned before, the Warrens were doing a lot of interviews with the Snedekers or on their own about the Snedekers and the case that they were involved in. During these interviews, the Warrens actually said that they finally did arrange a formal exorcism. As I mentioned before, they are not acknowledged by the church, so I guess they tried to say that this time they actually did ask for permission and they did do a legit exorcism and it still didn't work. This is a real crazy demon here. But their story wasn't really making sense, and Ed couldn't even give the name of the priest that they contacted. He just called him Father A, Father A, Father A. He did this, he did that. And the interviewer pressed Ed for more information about Father A. Like, can you tell me his name? Like, who's Father A? And, quote, Ed says, Father A, that's the name I'll give you. I don't have to give you anything. So a common theme, at least with these interviews about the Snedeker family, is that Ed would become frequently hostile and threatening, super aggressive towards interviewers, especially people who asked questions that were skeptics. But he was very snappy, like he did not want to be challenged in any way. But it also came out that the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford in Connecticut says that there was never any official sanctioned exorcism rite. As I mentioned earlier, Ray Garton was working on this book with the Warrens and the Snedekers as well, but the Warrens had commissioned him, so he's kind of like mostly working for them. They're the ones who want this out. So he speaks to Ed about his concerns. The stories are not adding up. Like, you want this to be nonfiction, but like, it seems like they're faking it. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. So according to Ray Garton, Ed responds to this with, quote, oh, they're crazy. Everybody who comes to us is crazy. Otherwise, why would they come to us? You've got some of the story. Just use what works and make the rest up. And make it scary. You write scary books, right? That's why we hired you. So just make it up and make it scary. This is what Ed Warren said about the Snedekers when Ray Garton was concerned that they were lying. Like, yeah, yeah, that's all I have to say. So Ray Garton is like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't even know what to do. And he also says, quote, this is from Ray Garton himself. As a kid, I used to follow their ghost hunting exploits. Back when I was reading about the Warrens, they were just ghost hunters. But after The Exorcist was so wildly popular, Ed and Lorraine stopped encountering ghosts and began to uncover demon infestations. And it seems wherever they went, people were being sexually molested by demons. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which it does. It does make me wonder, Mr. Ray Garden. I'm wondering a lot right now. So he says that after his little altercation, I guess, with Ed basically exposing himself as a fucking fraud, the Warrens kept trying to convince Garton, like, we're not lying. Like, we have evidence. We have a videotape of a ghost on camera. And every time he would ask to see it, they would misplace it. Something was wrong with it. It was broken. They have to get a new copy. There was always an excuse why they didn't have it, but they swore up and down, like, we have real proof. Like, just because we're saying these people are crazy and we're making up this story, the rest of the stories we have are not made up. But they could never get a hold of this proof to show to Garton. And Garton also says that he spoke with the other writers that have worked with Ed and Lorraine because, as I said really earlier back on in the video, Ed and Lorraine made a lot of money off of selling rights to books or like working with authors to make scary books based on their cases. And he says that most of the authors he spoke to, if not all of them, say that they had almost identical experiences as he did with the Warrens. So, and finally, this is the real piece of evidence that really sways how I view the Warrens, and I think it would sway you too, depending on whether or not you believe this is based in fact. And I have saved the worst for last for a good reason. So if you don't want to hear about child essay, and grooming, this is going to be about that. But the final piece is Judith Penny, the allegations brought forward by her. Before I get into the Judith Penny allegations, I just want to say I personally feel as though I did my due diligence in this. I almost got a hold of the court case that she testified in, but I couldn't find the actual like quote of her testimony, but I did the best that I could. I will say this never went to criminal court or civil court. There's no lawsuit, there's nothing. So as of this time, this is still just allegations. They are not proven false or proven correct. So do with that what you will. But these are pretty serious allegations. And if child SA, if child exploitation, minor exploitation, grooming, that bothers you, there's a reason that I put this at the end of the video. So just get out. It's okay. But anyways, so a year after The Conjuring came out in 2014, Judith Penny came forward with allegations about the Warrens. Because of this timeline, because it happened after the movie came out and it was a success, people believe that she did this as like a cash grab opportunity or did this for just clout, wanted to get her name out there. But there were no charges ever filed. She never went forward with a lawsuit of any kind. She didn't do any type of like criminal cases, nothing. Like what happened was there were a few lawsuits about the rights to the Conjuring movie with producers and things like that. People believe that some parts of the movie were stolen from authors of different books, and within these lawsuits, Judith Penny was asked to come forward and makes a sworn statement about her relationship with Ed and Lorraine Warren, because it was discovered in these lawsuits and it was alleged that Warner Brothers, like the top dogs of Warner Brothers, not just the people who produced the movie, but I guess all the way up, allegedly, they knew about these allegations from Judith Penny prior to making the movie, and they still made the movie and they still portrayed the Warrens in the way that they did. So that is how it came out. It never came out publicly, and as I said, it's pretty hard to find the documents themselves. Like, I registered for Pacer, so I could have done it. I just didn't have the money at the time to buy the like actual like legal filings, and I wanted to get this video out and I didn't have the money, so I couldn't do it. But if you have a Pacer account and you can afford to purchase the legal filings, like you can see her testimony. But she never like went forward to a tabloid or did interviews or anything like that. So to say that it was a cash grab or for attention, I'm not really sure I personally agree with that statement, because if it was, I feel like it would be more publicly known and she would have come forward herself. It wouldn't be secondhand information like articles from people who did get their hands on the court filings. But Penny says that she was 15 when she was taking the city bus to school. And as I mentioned prior, Ed, in the beginning of their joined ghost hunting career, Ed was a bus driver for the city that they lived in. And she rode this bus to school, and that is how she met Ed Warren. And he was 30 years old when she met him. So Judith Penny is 15 years old. She's taking the city bus to school, and her 30-year-old bus driver, Ed Warren, is becoming friends with her. Like, that is how she alleges it starts. She says that it started off amicably. They were just friends, but how can a 30-year-old man even be just friends with a 15-year-old girl? But eventually it does escalate to a sexual relationship. So in 1963, Judith Penny moves in with the Warrens, and this is allegedly when Judith Penny and Ed Warren end up evolving into a sexual relationship. And it is alleged by Judith that Lorraine had full knowledge of this relationship. So obviously, with her moving in, she could be seen in public with the Warrens, and their story for her living with them was one of two. The first was that she was their niece. The second story was that she was a troubled youth who was 18 years old, and because she was 18, they let her move into their house, and she took care of small business matters and took care of the home while they were away doing investigations. But either way, they did lie about their relationship with her to other people. When a 15-year-old girl moves in with a 30-year-old man her and his wife, people notice. So some of the neighbors called the cops, and the cops come, and obviously somebody's getting arrested, because why is a 30-year-old couple living with a 15-year-old girl that's not related to them in any way? And someone does get arrested, and it's Judith Penny, because apparently at this time in 1963 in Connecticut, it was illegal to have relations with a married man. So instead of the married grown man that is having sexual relations and has now moved in a minor into his house, he's not in trouble, it's the girl. Obviously, of course, it's her fault. Duh. Like, of course, that makes so much sense. In the 60s, yeah, like, that's how it goes. So she was arrested, but in short, really nothing came of it. She spent one night in jail, and it's because she refused to admit to this relationship. The police kept asking her, and she just wouldn't admit it. And because of this, she spent the night in jail, and then she was sentenced to go to like a delinquent kid meeting every month or so. And Ed was actually the one who brought her to all of these meetings. So in 1978, Penny gets pregnant, and this is just like really like rough. So if she wanted to keep the baby, allegedly Ed and Lorraine told her that she had to say that somebody broke into the house and essayed her, and that's how she became pregnant. She would not do that, and so then she was forced to get an abortion. And Penny says that actually they took her to get the abortion and then dropped her off at home and then went to one of their weekly lectures afterwards and left her there to just deal with it. Judith also claims to have helped Ed fake a lot of their like proof that they have, one of which was the white lady. The white lady is allegedly a ghost that haunts the Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut, and Ed says that he has video proof of her in the cemetery. Judith says that it's actually her running in the cemetery in a sheet, and with a little bit of video magic they made it look like it was an apparition. But this whole situation, as I said, and I want to reiterate, it is solely alleged. There have been no formal like lawsuits or charges filed, and I don't think there will be. Also, we clearly don't have Ed's side of the story. As much as I hate to say that, we don't have his side of the story because these allegations came out when he was passed, and there was a big article. There's a couple articles, but the big one was the Hollywood Reporter, and I guess they had reached out to Lorraine Warren's lawyer, and at the time he said like she can't comment, she's in declining health. But her daughter, who's also named Judy, which makes this all like so much more like just like disgusting to me. It's already disgusting, but just the fact that like it's the daughter's name as well, like, ugh. Judy alleges that she'd never seen any type of like suspicious relationship between Judith Penny and her parents, but this is kind of conflicting because a lot of people say that there's reports that Judy, like the Warrens' daughter, actually lived with the grandparents because the Warrens traveled so much. So, you know, how could she see any type of relationship, good or bad, if she didn't live with them? Other people say that she did stay with them, so there's that. So, as I had mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, Lorraine was involved in consulting in the screenplay of the Conjuring movies, and one interesting part about her involvement in it is that there was a very specific clause that I said had basically portrayed them in a positive light. But now that we've touched on the Judith Penny allegations, I'd like to actually say what the clause was. So there was a talent lawyer that was involved in the whole litigation of The Conjuring, and she had said that she'd never seen people with such specific like clauses in their contracts unless they were like convicted of a crime already and like had done that crime and they didn't want people to talk about it. So this is what it said. It said that the movies cannot depict the Warrens in criminal acts including sex with minors, child pornography, prostitution, essay, or extramarital affairs. This was specifically written and put out there before The Conjuring even came out, before it went into production, and before Judith Penny even came forward with her allegations. This was in there from Lorraine Warren and her lawyers. So I do think that says a lot. And in my opinion, and many other people's opinions, a lot of people think that Judith Penny came forward because she saw The Conjuring and saw how Ed and Lorraine were depicted, and it was so far off from the truth that she lived, allegedly, and she wanted to at least make her story heard in the court hearings about like the rights and who deserved the money to it. But like I said, Judith Penny didn't make any money from the Conjuring movies. She didn't make any money off of her allegations. She didn't come forward publicly, I should say, with the allegations. And yeah, so that's really all I've got. And I say that as if I haven't been recording for 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I hope you enjoyed even a fraction of this. I really enjoyed researching this. Let me know if you guys have any suggestions on what you think I should look into. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.